Welcome to episode 12 of the 3am Fear podcast. This is a little different from what I usually do. I usually take up unsolved cases because I love unsolved cases. It's solved, but it's quite an interesting case because there are a lot of questions that have been left unanswered. There are a lot of things to discuss. And most importantly, even though the killer was found, the main question is, was justice served? This is the story of the Brentwood Massacre. Hello and welcome to the 3am Fear podcast. I'm Nikita Ferrao, mystery and thriller author. On this podcast, I talk about real crimes and real people. Due to the graphic nature of some of this content, listener discretion is advised. You can find the episode show notes on my website 3amfear.com. Let's get started. On April 14, 2014, a group of friends had a small get-together at their home near the University of Calgary campus in the northwest neighborhood of Brentwood. 5 young people shared a small house on a quiet block on Butler Crescent. The house was a well-known rental for university students and was popularly known as the Butler Mansion. It was a relatively small gathering, with many of those invited having gone to junior high or high school together. For the most part, the mood of the party was laid back and relaxed. No one could have predicted the terrifying turn the night would take and how quickly it would all unravel. It was on that day that 5 young students would lose their lives, and this incident would be forever known as the biggest mass killing in Calgary's history. Now, there is a lot to talk about this Brentwood massacre. It's not just about 5 people's killings. It's not just about 5 murders. There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot that happened before and there's a lot that happened after the killing. So let's get started right from the beginning. The University of Calgary was at the end of its semester, and like every end, the students had something called a BST. This is basically a huge party where the whole campus comes together to celebrate the end of the semester. There are a lot of parties going on campus, some off campus. This is more like a cool-off time for the students. Exams are done, everything is over, and now they just want to relax. So this is where they throw these amazing parties for their friends, for their classmates, or the friends of the friends. This particular incident took place on 14 April 2014 when 5 students were getting ready to go to one such party. Jordan Segura, Josh Hunter, Caitlin Perez, Lawrence Hong, and Zachariah Rathwell. The party took place on Brentwood, Canada, and it was a house party that was happening on 11 Butler Crescent, Northwest, aka Butler Mansion. Now, this house was very famous as it would typically be rented out to college students. At that time, Jordan Segura was staying at that house with his other college friends. Jordan was attending the University of Calgary, where he majored in history and religious studies. He wanted to be a humanitarian once he graduated. He was raised by Patty, a single mother. He also had a brother who was only 17 months older than him. Patty and her boys were really close and were a tight-knit family. Jordan was described as an outgoing person. He was happy and he loved complimenting people. He always knew how to bring a smile on someone's face. Jordan was an outgoing person, but as much as he loved going out and meeting people, he equally loved being home alone. While at college, he ended up interviewing a funeral director for a research paper. He made such a good impact at the funeral home that they offered him a job. This job was to be a limo driver for the families. So as per Patty, he got a license and started his job. He loved doing it. He would drive the families to wherever they wanted to go. He would wait till the funeral was over, and if someone wanted to stay a little longer to mourn, he was more than happy to wait for them. He never complained. He would even take these families out for snacks if they wanted to. He was the perfect host. Jordan's dream of humanitarian was showcased in his work. When he was asked what he would do after graduation, he said he wanted to be a consultant for businesses and the government. So these people, they have officials, and these officials have to go to different countries around the world, and they have to meet people in different countries. So what basically Jordan wanted to do was, he wanted to tell them, or he wanted to teach them what are the different cultures. So suppose they are going to a country, I'm from India, so suppose someone from USA or someone from Canada is coming to India, then Jordan would be the person who will tell them that this is how you say hello in India, this is how you respect each other in India, this is what you should not do in India. So basically it's like he would tell them what to do, what not to do. He would teach them about the culture of that country so that they don't end up doing a mess and breaking relations with that country. So that was something that he really wanted to do. He wanted to build relationships, and he wanted to help others in doing the same. On this day, that is the day of the party, Jordan and a couple of his other roommates wanted to throw a BSD, which was their way of celebrating the end of the semester and a kind of a cool off from their hectic school year. He also decided on inviting his longtime friend, Caitlin Perez, to the party. Caitlin Perez, or also known as Katy Perez, was a 23-year-old student from Mount Royal University, where she majored in English. She and Jordan were friends from high school. Her parents, Greg Miller and Shannon Perez, loved and adored her. She had an older sister and younger brother. Her father later remarried, and she was blessed with a younger sister. She adored her younger sister, and they shared a strong bond. Katy was described as being stubborn and feisty. Her mother said that they kind of had a love-hate relationship. They loved each other, but they always fought. She knew exactly what she wanted from life, and she was not afraid to go for it. This gave her father comfort, knowing that his daughter was mature enough to look after herself and not make any wrong decision in life. It was also said that if she knew any of her friends' boyfriends were not good to her friends, then she was not afraid of saying this to their faces. She never settled for any decision. She had a passion for dance and was also an artist. She was often described as an outgoing girl. She was a very creative person and enjoyed everything that life had to offer. From a very young age, she was into dance, gardening, painting, reading, candle making. You name anything creative, and Katy loved doing it. But most of all, she loved dance. She loved dance so much that when she grew up, she wanted to be a dance teacher so that she can teach others the same. Her uncle described her as, quote, small girl with big courage, end quote. Jordan had also invited 23-year-old Joshua Hunter to the party. Joshua also attended the University of Calgary and was a passionate musician. He was the oldest and most loved in the family, which included his parents and older sister. He was well known for his giant hugs and would always offer one to whoever needed it. Ever since a child, he would play a lot of instruments, with his favorite being drums. At school, his friends described him as being kind and wholesome. He wasn't much of an outgoing person, he was very shy, but once you get to know him, he will always warm up to you. Even though he is a shy person, when he is up there on stage with his drums, he is a completely different person. He was unrecognizable. He even had a band called Zachariah and the Prophets, the lead singer of which was his friend Zachariah. Zachariah Rothwell, aka Zach, the son of Bruce and Rhonda Lee Rothwell, went to Alberta College of Art and Design. Like Josh, Zachariah was also into music and had always been since he was little. He would spend hours and hours practicing. It gave him a sense of calmness. Along with playing the guitar, Zach was also gifted with a beautiful voice. He had found his true calling in music. On April 12, 2014, 2 days before the party, the band celebrated a major milestone, the launch of its first EP. Katie was planning on attending this EP but changed her mind the last minute and decided on meeting them at the upcoming party. Speaking of his character, Zach was the type of person you would love to hang out with, the one you would always trust would make you laugh. He never took anything in life seriously and loved to live his life to the fullest. He wouldn't get mad or irritated at the slightest things, and it would take something really big to make him angry. He was the kind of person who knew how to lighten up a room or make people laugh when there was dead silence looming in the air. Another person invited to this party was Lawrence Hong, the firstborn son of Lorenzo and Marlene Hong. He was a 27-year-old man who had moved to Canada from the Philippines when he was just 7 years old. He grew up in Canada with his parents and brother. His family described him as having a really big heart, and he was always determined to achieve what he set his mind to. He had such a big heart that if someone needed food or clothes right off his back, then he would gladly do so. He was in his final year at Calgary University in the Urban Studies and Infrastructure program. Ever since a child, he had expressed his interest in urban design. When he was in elementary school, he asked his father for help to build a high-tech bridge. Initially, Lawrence was studying engineering, but after a trip to Hong Kong, he decided to shift his major to urban studies. He and his brother took 2 days to move to and fro in the transit. He was fascinated by how so many people could be moved around in such small space. He then decided that he wanted to become a transit planner after college. He wanted to create a more functional society where people could get to their destination without having the hassle of getting to their destination. During college, he was also working part-time with his mother as a sales assistant for a local home builder. Some might see this as a chore, but Lawrence loved working here. He got paid and spent time with his mother. As he was in his final year, he was working on his final thesis, and this took up a lot of time and he was stressed. This party was a way for him to escape, even if it was just for a few hours. So on 14 April 2014, Zach had come home from school that day and told his mother that he had plans to go out with Josh and a couple of other friends to celebrate the end of the semester. He told his mother he was going to take the bike as he was planning on getting drunk and he didn't want to take his car and drive it back in a hungover state. As the party began, more and more people started to show up. There were about 30 people at the party, which now included Katie, Jordan, Josh, Zach, and Lawrence. People were going all over the house, drinking and having the time of their lives. Some were also in the backyard where the bonfire was lit up. Of all the attendees, there was one that arrived much later on, a man named Matthew DeGrood. Matthew was a 22-year-old student at Calgary University and was described as a quiet person. He preferred keeping it to himself and was really good at school, including getting straight A's. While studying, he was also working at Safeway, an American supermarket. His father, Doug DeGrood, was a senior officer with the Calgary Police Department. While at the university, he majored in psychology and minored in law and society. Around this time, he had gotten an acceptance letter to go to law school in fall and continue his studies. But in the spring of 2014, his parents saw that there was something different. He was suddenly interested in politics and religion, which was completely out of character for him. And he was also more and more active on social media. I know being active on social media for a teen in 2014 was not that big of a deal. I mean, every teen would be interested in social media, even for today. Teens are always on social media. But Matthew's obsession was a little different. His social media obsession was a little different and quite scary. He had taken a year-long break from Facebook and was now posting up to 20 status updates a day. And these statuses were not just about his life or how much fun he was having or what he was up to, but he was sharing lyrics from heavy metal songs like "The World Needs a Hero," along with quotes from the Bible. He was also posting conspiracy theories. He would spend hours alone in his bedroom and only join his family for dinner. Once he was done, he would go back to his room and start posting again. His parents were afraid that he was on drugs, especially because of his history. So he had a history of drugs and his parents were afraid that he has relapsed. It was not just his parents, but his friends noticed too. He would send out long, rambling texts and seem paranoid at times. His father tried to get his son committed to hospital, but given that his son appeared lucid, he felt that a doctor would not be able to help him. Matthew was invited to this party by a boy named Brendan. Brendan was his childhood friend, and along with his parents, Brendan also noticed that Matthew was not being himself. So he thought that this party would be a nice change for him. Brendan told him that you can't be home alone for long. You need to get out, and this party is an amazing place for you to start socializing. Matthew agreed to this. He even asked if he could stay over, and Brendan agreed. That day, Matthew updated his status to read, "Dread and the Fugitive Mind, The World Needs a Hero, names of songs by a heavy metal band." So after this party, all of Matthew's previous posts were deleted and it was unknown as to who did it. Was Matthew the one or someone else? Now Matthew on this day was actually working at Safeway and his shift was supposed to end at 11 p.m. His co-worker Andrea mentioned that on this particular day, Matthew just seemed a little odd. He was quieter than usual. In fact, during the shift, she saw him buying 3 packs of garlic bulbs. That night, he sent a series of random texts to his parents, including Book of Revelations, Uranus and Leo, and Metal Goat, Illuminati, and Mary doesn't have to die this time, Operation Mindcrime, 2 American soldiers, and it went on and on. His texts did not make sense. No one could understand what he meant. He would just send this one-liners or a few words, some of them from songs, some of them from the Bible. They just didn't make sense to anyone. Matthew's shift was supposed to end at 11 p.m., but he clocked out at 8 p.m. That's 3 whole hours prior to his leave. While leaving, Matthew was wearing his work clothes, that's black pants with tan-colored shirt with a black apron, black shoes, and a black rain jacket. Although he drove to work that day, by the time he had clocked out, he left with his car still in the parking lot. He took a public transit to the party at around 10 p.m. This is when Andrea realized that he had gone and she immediately texted him to ask where he was. For this he replied, quote, "Trust that I never hurt anyone, all will be known." End quote. Now the only person who knows that he is going to be at this party is Brendan. His parents think that he is at work and Andrea has no idea where he has gone. When texting all these people, Matthew also texts Brendan asking him directions to the house. Now Brendan finds this odd because he has been there before. So how can he forget the way? Matthew and Brendan meet at a service station and then walk to the party. The way to the service station was just a 6-minute walk. Brendan described Matthew as being irritated at one point, and during the walk, Matthew even offered Brendan a clove of garlic, telling him that he would need it later. Brendan jokingly asked if it was for vampires, for which Matthew said that they are real. Matthew also gave him a long knife with a white handle in a brown leather sheath. I'm not sure what Brendan did when Matthew offered him this, but I'm assuming that something weird must have happened during the walk. Matthew quickly added these things back into his pocket. Once Matthew arrived at the party and started talking to guests, people started to find him quite uncomfortable. It was mainly because of his topic of conversation. He was discussing conspiracy theories about the blood moon and the apocalypse. He had a lot to talk about, but the more he talked, the more people became uncomfortable. In fact, he also had a bunch of those garlic cloves and he started handing them out to the people. While doing that, he said, quote, "Keep the vampires away," end quote. He then further started talking about vampires and said that in order to kill one, you will have to stab it in the heart with a knife. Because of everything that he said, people started becoming concerned and scared. But as I said, Matthew was inside and a lot of people were outside at the bonfire, so they did not know that what exactly was happening inside the house. Now at the party, there was a guy named Daniel. He was just like Brendan by character and had not known Matthew for that long. When he overheard what Matthew said, especially about the ramblings, he realized how scared people got. So he went close to Matthew and offered to take him out for a short walk around the block, just to clear his head. Matthew agreed and they took a long 45-minute walk. During this walk, Matthew kept repeating that the world was going to end at midnight. Worried that his friend would harm himself, Daniel said that it was all right if he did not feel fine. When he got back to the party, Matthew put on a pair of blue medical latex gloves and said that they were to hide his fingerprints in case he had to kill someone. He started washing his hands and drying them while still wearing the gloves. According to some sources, Matthew also had some good conversations. He spoke to Zach about his band and school and also talked to others. He seemed quite laid back. So there are these two sides of Matthew. On one side, he's scaring people. He's telling them that, vampires are real. He has garlic with him. He's telling them that, the world is going to end. And on another side, he is talking to Zach. He's all cool. He's laid back. He's talking to him about his band. And everything seems good with him. So he's showing these two separate personalities. He's showing these two separate sides of him together at the same party with two different sets of people. At around 12:30 a.m. on April 15, 2014, he joined a group of friends at the bonfire. He seemed okay at first until he put his phone on the axe head and threw it into the fire. His act startled the people around him. A person from the group thought that this was an accident and so he went to the fire and managed to get his phone out. Once his phone was out, Matthew did not stop. He took the axe and smashed his phone. After that, he acted as if nothing happened and started walking around. During all of this, his parents were trying to get hold of Matthew. Now, while all this was happening, Matthew was rambling. Now he has gone for a walk. He has come back from the walk. He was talking to Zach. Apparently, he was talking to Zach and he was all cool. And then he went to the bonfire and everyone was there. They were chilling and he threw his phone into the bonfire. With the axe head, he threw his phone into the bonfire. Someone got it out and then he took the axe and then he smashed his phone once again. And when all this was happening, Matthew's parents, on the other hand, were scared for him because he had not called. They have no idea where he is gone. They think that he is still at work. They're trying to call him over and over again. He's not picking the call. Of course, his phone is not with him. He just smashed his phone. So, after several failed attempts of trying to get in touch with him, his mother decided on calling the cops. Now remember, Matthew's father is actually a police officer. His father, on the other hand, took out his car and decided to look for Matthew. The first place he went was Matthew's workplace. He saw that Matthew's car was still in the parking lot, so he assumed that everything was all right. He then went in to find out what happened. While there, Andrea told him that Matthew left long back. Worried about what had happened to his son, Matthew's father starts looking out for him. He was afraid that Matthew might hurt himself. While driving, he comes across a patrol car that was on duty. He then explains to the officer in charge all about Matthew's condition and disappearance. While this whole conversation is taking place, it's around 1 a.m. now. Most of the people had left the party, leaving behind only a small group of close friends and Matthew. So Brendan, who was still there along with a couple of others, went down the street to McDonald's to get something to eat. Now around 15 minutes later, as I said, Matthew's father is there. He's talking to the cops. He's explaining to the officer in charge that he can't find his son. Something must have happened. And at that time, the officer receives a call and says that there is a situation at 11 Butler Crescent, Northwest. Now back at the house are Katie, Jordan, Lawrence, Zach, Josh and Matthew, as well as another roommate upstairs. But she was sleeping with her headphones on, so she couldn't hear anything that was happening downstairs. Lawrence had fallen asleep on a chair while Katie, Jordan and Josh were sitting on a couch across from him just talking. Zach and Matthew were in the kitchen, with Zach just talking about his band. Matthew started asking questions about it, and it is said that this was all happening around 1:20 a.m. This is when Matthew just randomly, mid-conversation, takes out a knife from the knife block in the kitchen and starts to stab Zach. He stabbed Zach a total of 7 times before running into the living room where he stabbed Josh 6 times. He then stabbed Jordan once while Katie tried to run, but Matthew caught up to her while she was in another room, and that is where he stabbed her 4 times. He then went back into the living room and saw Lawrence sleeping on the chair. He stabbed him 4 times. Josh, who was in the living room, had suffered major damage, but he still managed to gather all the strength that he could and get up and run into the front yard and start screaming for help. Matthew saw this and went outside and started chasing him, a knife over his head. So he was basically running with a knife, holding a knife over his head. He was running behind Josh. During all of this, the roommate, who was still sound asleep with her headphones on, had no clue what had just happened. With all the thumping sound and the feel of the commotion, she took off her headphones, and that's when she heard everyone scream for help. She immediately locked her door and called the Calgary 911 call center. Rebecca Donaldson, who was already 7 hours into her night shift, picked up the call. In an interview with Crime Beat, Rebecca said, quote, "I just answered. Calgary police, what's the address of your emergency?" And on the other end, there was a female, and she actually seemed very calm. She told me she needed the police, and I was hearing a lot of people yelling in the background to get help. And I was hearing people crying, and I was getting her to explain what happened. And she didn't know very much because she just got there and saw all of her friends. I'm assuming they are her friends gasping for air, and it was unbelievable. It felt like a 20-minute conversation, but it was only a couple of minutes, and the police were there immediately. It was so good to hear they were there. They arrived because sometimes they can be busy on the other end of the city, and it can take longer than that. End quote. The operator said it took her years to gather up the courage to ask for help. The phone call was so traumatic that she was later diagnosed with PTSD. While this phone call is taking place, Josh and Matthew are currently outside with Matthew chasing Josh. Brendan and the whole group come back from McDonald's and notice that Zach and Josh are chasing each other. So they get out of the car, and that's when they see Matthew running behind them, the knife high up in the air. They also hear screams of Katie inside. Brendan, the roommate who invited Matthew, ran after him. Josh was still in a fight for his life and ran back into the house and collapsed in the lawn. When Brendan finally caught up to Matthew, he asked him to put the knife down. Matthew handed the knife to Brendan. He then wiped his bloody hands on Brendan's hands and said, quote, "We are now blood brothers." End quote. After saying this, he warned Brendan not to get in his way or he would be next. Brendan let Matthew go and went back to check on his friends. So now Brendan is back in the house with his other friends, trying to save as many people as they can. The girl with the headphones is also down and is helping Brendan save his friends. They apply pressure to the wounds to help stop the bleeding, as well as the two friends are currently on phone with the cops. By the time the cops showed up at the scene, the first person they found was Josh, lying unconscious in the front lawn. He still had a pulse, so he was immediately taken to the hospital. Upon further entering into the house, they found Zach and Jordan on the floor of the living room, lying next to each other. They were pronounced dead on the scene. They also found a friend of Lawrence's who was trying to apply pressure on his wounds, hoping to save him. But it was too late. The cops walked further into the house, and that's when they found Katie in a different room. She was in a state of shock and was going in and out of consciousness. She was immediately sent to the ambulance and to the police. Though Josh and Katie would unfortunately not make it, they were each pronounced dead minutes after they reached the hospital. The cops took Brendan's testimony and he said that Matthew just ran away. So as per him, Matthew was on his feet and not in a vehicle, so he couldn't have gone far. The police started patrolling the area and around 20 minutes later, they had Matthew. They found him running just a couple of blocks away. When he was caught, he attempted to fight off the authorities. The authorities later said that while they were trying to get him to calm down, he showed no sign of fear. One of the officers even said that they had canine dogs brought in order to catch Matthew, to sniff him out, and the dog got violent and Matthew ended up punching the dog. He was just not scared. At one point, he even said that he wanted to talk to a lawyer and that he didn't do it. They tried to contemplate on how to get him to surrender. After a lot of back and forth, one of the officers finally managed to hit Matthew and get him on the ground so that they could arrest him. When the officer finally took in Matthew's name, he realized whose son he was. He was the son of the senior officer of their police department. So Matthew was taken to the police station and from there to the hospital to get treatment for his wounds. Matthew was put on a stretcher and taken to the hospital after suffering wounds on his arms and face. Before taking him, an officer read him his rights, officially announcing his arrest. He asked to speak with a lawyer, and when he told he wasn't obliged to say anything, he said, quote, "I am the Son of God." End quote. During the journey, he was heard rambling on and on. He said, quote, "I believe killing people in self-defense is just unfair. I tried to commit suicide in a dumpster I was in. I cut my wrists. I believe I am Jesus incarnated. I am not paranoid, schizo, or crazy. I believe we live in the new age. I believe Satan is the true God. What I did may seem atrocious, but I was killing Medusas and the werewolves." End quote. When he arrived at the hospital, he was still talking. He continued to say, quote, "I've been sober for 6 years. I didn't enjoy killing at all. I said sorry, but the Son of God was controlling me." End quote. These are some of the statements that have been taken. I mean, he was under arrest, he was read out his rights, and he was told that anything that he says after this can and will be held against him. But he kept on saying, he kept on rambling. So these are some of the things that he went on saying, and the officer who was there with him, he started noting down all these statements, all these sentences, even though none of this made sense. So basically whatever Matthew is saying is that he did not intentionally go and kill them. At one point he's saying that he didn't intentionally do it, he was asked to do it. And on another point he's saying that I was trying to kill them, and then he points out the reasons why he was trying to kill them. In one of his statements, he spoke about Zach, saying, quote, "The taller guy who looked like a werewolf was going to kill. A knife block was there and I thought he was going to kill me first, so I did what I had to do. I don't feel bad for doing what I had to do because it's justice and I was being controlled." End quote. He goes on to say that the 5 students were a part of the Illuminati and that there were werewolves and Medusas and Satan. he kind of rambles on in this topic. That is the same thing. He says that they were a part of Illuminati. So he basically goes on rambling these things over and over again about Satan, about werewolves, Medusas, vampires. Remember, he had the garlic with him. So he goes on rambling these things which do not actually make any sense. At one point, he also said that he was the son of Satan and Hitler reincarnated. After telling his story, he demanded a lawyer but weirdly requested the cheapest one, someone who specializes in mass murders. At this point, he was still talking for hours. He said, quote, "When I stabbed them, I tried to do it mercifully. I aimed for the heart. They put up a struggle which made it hard, but just so you know, it wasn't sadistic or anything." End quote. The next morning, he asked if he was being charged with 3 counts of murder. The officer told him that it was not 3, but 5. What Matthew said next is quite graphic. He asked, quote, "Will it still be a murder if I was defending myself because he was really bothering me? So what happened was the big tall guy, we were talking about Buddhist philosophies, that we were all going to die, so just have fun, have sex, etc. He was obviously disagreeing with me and was towering over me, so I asked him to give me my space. We were walking towards the knife block, so I decided to shoot first. I didn't know what he was going to do, so I stabbed him. Then the people on the couch saw, and they obviously started freaking out. So I killed them from left to right as quickly as I could. The girl ran into the corner, so I went and stabbed her. I said, 'I'm sorry, I have to do this.' Then the guy from the kitchen wasn't dead, so I had to hunt him down, but then I just left." End quote. I have no words. Honestly, no words. I have several things running in my head, and I want to leave everything towards the end. I want to say a lot of things, and I'm going to do it all towards the end, not in between. Both of his hands were cuffed to the bed. He was asked if he wanted one removed, but he said no. He said he was afraid if he was let loose, he would do it again. He also added that he regretted killing that girl. The doctors at the hospital were certain he was suffering from a psychotic episode, and so that's when they admitted him to the hospital, and later on he would be diagnosed with schizophrenia. On April 15, 2014 is when all the families of the victims started receiving the news about what happened. With this, I will be ending today's episode. There is a lot more to cover. What happened to the families, what happened to Matthew, and finally, was justice served? We will discuss this in the next episode. If you like this episode and this podcast, then please do give it a 5-star rating on whichever podcasting platform you're listening from. It would be very helpful. If you have any recommendations or want to hear a specific case, then drop a comment on my YouTube page, 3am Fear Podcast. You can also find me on Instagram and DM me your case requests. Until then, have a great week and stay safe out there. That's it for the day. Thank you so much for being here. Don't forget to follow me on social media, especially Instagram. The links are in my description box. You can also find the episode show notes on my website 3amfear.com. If you love reading thrillers, you can now check out my free ebook available on my website. Once again, thank you so much for being here today and see you next week. Have a great week and stay safe out there.